Now let us prepare for this morning's service. The opening words were written by an anonymous author. May we be reminded here, excuse me, of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. Christine will now light our chalice.
Our affirmation: we light this chalice in the search for truth and the spirit of love. We unite in worship and fellowship. As an extension of our chalice, I want to take a moment of silence to light these 3 candles for some of the names of those who have recently been affected by police brutality. We cannot cover all the names of those affected. We will light a candle for the life of Omari Cryer, for the life of Tori Brown, and for the life of Tatiana Jefferson. May these lights be a symbol of our commitment to continue the work of social justice and to proclaim that indeed Black lives matter. We also want to recognize all victims of gun violence. By definition, mass shootings occur in our country more days than they do not. We are a country where 120 guns are owned for every 100 people. Our first is a hymn. We are a gentle, angry people. Number 170. I know that with Carolyn and Kevin not being here, our intrepid choir, joined by Sally, our very intrepid tech person, is going to do their level best to lead us in song. So let's help them a lot by joining them in song. And we're starting with number 170. We are a gentle, angry people. Ladies, take it away.
Can't hear. We Yeah, I'm leaving.
Way to go, folks. Way to go. Now is the time in service for joys and sorrows. If you are visiting us for the first time, this would be a lovely time for you to introduce yourself if you are so inclined to do so. For those who are gathering in person, we invite you to raise your hand and then stand where you are seated and speak aloud your joy and sorrow. I will go around with the microphone and join you to help you in that endeavor. And we invite you to share what is in your heart. For those who are joining us online, we're very grateful that you are with us as well. We invite you to type into the chat your joys and sorrows. Sally will do her best to read them aloud. We invite you to share what is in your heart. So raise your hand if you have a joy or a sorrow you'd like to share today, and I'm coming on over.
Hi, Martha. I'm Martha. I would say a joy for me is being with you all here today. And I would say a sorrow is, the people who are dying because of injustice.
Are there any other joys and sorrows today? Sally?
Hi, my name is Sally, and I have a joy that I'm seeing my good friend Jim Clark, who I know is here because of Martha. And he's told me so much about his life and his connection to the Catholic worker and just to the social justice movement in the Catholic. So thank you, Jim, for being here. I know it was a big deal to come. Thank you, thank you.
Are there any other joys and sorrows?
My name is Juliet, and I found out that last week my brother had been shot and killed. We were estranged. I really haven't spoken to him. He left New York like 30 years ago, and he was very, disconnected from our family. And I haven't really spoken to him in like 4 years. So it's just really shocking. And I'm my mom's caregiver, and she's like having a lot of trouble accepting it. And that I found out this week is it's just a continuum of all this like horrible violence in this country where human lives are not respected and where all our solutions are so violent. and a culture that doesn't value even small children is so saddening and disturbing to me. And, this week I was feeling so helpless, so angry about just everything that happened in Buffalo and Texas. And, this culture of cruelty and vengeance really needs to be replaced with one of peace and love and kindness. And when we see people, we shouldn't accept, cruelty and violence. We should call it out and decry it and declare that there's a better way to be. There's a more loving way to be, and that we value all lives. So I really hope something changes. And, like I said, I was really estranged from my brother. I feel like, I felt like I lost him in my life a long time ago. So I really just see this through the lens of everything that's going on. And he happened in his death happened in Florida, where everybody has a gun. And, that's the solution to life's challenges. It's just such a grotesque way to live. And, America is so unique in their embrace and celebration of vengeance and cruelty. I mean, that's what they were founded on. So why should we be surprised? Anyway, I'm just grateful that I'm here among people who understand that life shouldn't be like that, and that there's a better way to be. So thank you.
Juliet, we're just so glad. That you found the strength to come and be here with us and share that message. Thank you.
Good morning. I just wanted to say that you're not alone. A lot of people are feeling anxious and frustrated and just, confused and everything else. And that's the norm right now. After Buffalo and Uvalde and all that. So it's a frustrating, angry, heart-breaking time. So you're not alone.
Good morning. My name is George. My joy and sorrow are personal. Thank you for sharing what you did. My joy is my family. I have a wonderful family. And my sorrow is there are deep divisions in that currently seem insurmountable. But, I have hope, and I believe in prayer. Thank you.
Are there any other joys or sorrows here in the sanctuary? Sally, do we have, I'm coming over to Liam. Hi, Liam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liam. I'd just like to briefly share a joy that it is to be here with you all today as a visitor, and that as well that today is my birthday and that I'm turning 25. And so it feels just like such a blessing to be here with you all. So thank you.
Nima has her hand up. Nima, if you can put your joy or sorrow in the chat, can you do that? Because we can't hear you through the microphone without that, unfortunately. I'll read it when you put it in. Okay.
for all the joys and sorrows we have heard, and for all those that go unspoken. We are grateful for sharing them in our community. And Nima from. Okay, well, thank you for sharing, Nima. Let us enter into a moment of silence and reflect on the joys and sorrows we have spoken and on the ones left unspoken and are carried in our hearts this morning. May the words and the silence we give them remind us that no matter our joys or sorrows, we are not alone. May it be so. Thank you, and I invite Ruth to provide us a reading for today.
The Catholic Worker. After leading a bohemian and radical left-leaning lifestyle in Greenwich Village, Dorothy Day fell in love with the Catholic Church and its rituals. She found her left-leaning philosophy compatible with Jesus Christ's call to leave behind friends and family and all material possessions in ministering to the poor and marginalized. A good disciple, she renounced material possessions and pledged herself to a life dedicated to the teachings of the gospel. She committed herself to a life of activism on behalf of the poor, of pacifism, and in opposition to both capitalism and communism. She liked to call herself an anarchist. After attending the Hunger March in Washington in 1932, she was inspired to create a leftist newspaper, The Catholic Worker. It began publishing in 1933 for a penny an issue and spawned an entire movement of Catholic workers. They continue to pursue her work to this day. This is her inaugural message to the readers of The Catholic Worker. To our readers, by Dorothy Day, The Catholic Worker, May 1933, the inaugural issue. For those who are sitting on park benches in the warm spring sunlight, for those who are huddling in shelters trying to escape the rain, for those who are walking the streets in the all but futile search for work, for those who think that there is no hope for the future, no recognition of their plight, this little paper is addressed. It is printed to call their attention to the fact that the Catholic Church has a social program, to let them know that there are men of God who are working not only for their spiritual, but for their material welfare. It's time there was a Catholic paper printed for the unemployed. The fundamental aim of most radical sheets is the conversion of its readers to radicalism and atheism. Is it not possible to be radical and not atheist? Is it not possible to protest, to expose, to complain, to point out abuses and demand reforms without desiring the overthrow of religion? In an attempt to popularize and make known the encyclicals of the popes in regard to social justice and the program put forth by the Church for the reconstruction of the social order, this news sheet, The Catholic Worker, is started. It is not yet known whether it will be a monthly, a fortnightly, or a weekly. It all depends on the funds collected for the printing and distribution. Those who can subscribe and those who can donate are asked to do so. This first number of The Catholic Worker was planned, written, and edited in the kitchen of a tenement on 15th Street, on subway platforms, on the L, on the ferry. There is no editorial office, no overhead in the way of telephone or electricity, no salaries paid. The money for the printing of the first issue was raised by begging small contributions from friends. A colored priest in Newark sent us $10 and the prayers of his congregation. A colored sister in New Jersey, garbed also in holy poverty, sent us $1. Another kindly and generous friend sent 25. The rest of it, the editors squeezed out of their own earnings. And at that, they were using money necessary to pay milk bills, gas bills, electric light bills. By accepting delay, the utilities did not know that they were furthering the cause of social justice. They were, for the time being, unwitting cooperators. Next month, someone may donate us an office, who knows? It is cheering to remember that Jesus Christ wandered this earth with no place to lay his head. The foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man had no place to lay his head. And when we consider our fly-by-night existence, our uncertainty, we remember with pride at sharing the honor that the disciples supped by the seashore and wandered through cornfields, picking the ears from the stalks wherewith to make their frugal meals.
Now is the time of our service where we take an offering. We know it is the gift of all of us that helps support our ability to thrive and gather. For those in person, we invite you to drop your offering into the basket on the left of the chancel as you exit into the parish hall after the service. For those online, links and instructions will be posted in the chat. You can mail us a check or donate to our PayPal giving page. Please give as generously as you can. Our offering will now be gratefully received. And I think in lieu of offertory music that Carolyn normally and Kevin normally applied, we'll just have like a little half moment of silence. And then when they are willing and able, our choir for today is going to lead us into a change in the order of service. We're going to rely on number 169, We Shall Overcome, and I'll let them find their ways forward and lead us in song.
We shall overcome someday. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. And we walk hand in hand someday. I believe we shall have someday. We shall be free. We shall be someday. Oh, be in my heart. I do believe we shall all be free someday. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall walk in peace someday.
Thank you, folks. And Sarah. So I have the honor of introducing our guest speaker today, Martha Hennessy. Martha Hennessy, who was gracefully already introduced ourselves to us, is a seventh grandchild of Dorothy Day and divides her time between the family farm in Vermont and practicing the works of mercy at Mary House Catholic Worker in New York City. Martha self-identifies as 66, a retired occupational therapist and grandmother of 8. She has been imprisoned protesting war and nuclear power, nuclear weapons, the use of drones, and the torture of prisoners in Guantanamo. She has traveled to Russia, Egypt, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Korea, and Palestine to better understand the effects of the United States military policy and war in other countries. Martha travels and speaks on the topics of life and work in community, Catholic social teaching, nuclear abolition, and peacemaking efforts in the tradition of the Catholic worker movement. We welcome Martha, and we are pleased that she can share her grandmother, Dorothy Day, with us today. Please welcome Martha Hennessy.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I don't like podiums. I think what I would like to share with you today is the 3 components. One, a little bit about Dorothy's life here in Staten Island. 2, her evolution of her life. And 3, how to follow her. And I was born here in July 11th, 1955, the feast of St. Benedict at Richmond Memorial Hospital. And I was baptized at St. Joseph's. My mother, Tamar, was conceived here at a beach house that Dorothy had purchased with the rights to the first novel, first and only novel that she ever wrote. And you know, Staten Island is very evocative for my family because of things that had occurred within our family history here. We had the Peter Morin Farm. My sister Mary was born here on the Peter Morin Farm before my mother and father had their own house. And for Dorothy, actually 5 grandchildren were born here in Staten Island. And Dorothy really relied on Staten Island as a retreat for her. She had a very strenuous work schedule. She was a single working mother in the 1920s, very, very unusual. And for her coming out to the beach and falling in love with Foster and being out in the boat on Raritan Bay with him was something that brought her closer to God, this connection to nature. She, Foster was a biologist and Dorothy was a woman of God from her childhood, whether she understood it or not early on. She was always communicating with God. So those are our connections with Staten Island. She also visited, my mother as a young child remembered visiting different gardens on Staten Island because Dorothy was writing articles as a way of supporting herself and her daughter. And I've had a chance to read some of those articles. I would encourage you all to research anything and everything you can on, her own primary writings, and maybe some of those garden journals. And Tamar herself became a lifelong gardener. I think it might have started here in Staten Island. So I want to say that, you know, we all see Dorothy in such a light of her the strength that she has given us, her fidelity, her constancy, her deep faith, and her perseverance. And I want to quote Patrick Jordan, who lived here on Staten Island. He and Kathleen, his wife, raised their kids right next door to the cottage that Dorothy would come to in her later years. And Patrick always reminds us of Dorothy's wit, resolve, and her sense of joy. And I have a book here that he put together. I would encourage you all to look it up. It's a beautiful little read. It's good for students. And just to give Patrick a nod in this story. So Dorothy was a young socialist. I know that we like to think of her in terms of being politically radical and theologically orthodox. And I would just like to question, you know, is it politically radical to take care of your citizens, to feed, clothe, give them health care, give them a decent education? So, you know, that business of politically radical, I want to just throw a curveball on that one. I come from the land of Bernie Sanders, by the way. And this other question of theological orthodoxy, you know, Jesus simply said, love one another. That's the orthodoxy that we're talking about, not some of the things we are dealing with today with religious institutions. So her experience, you know, she was born, you know, in the middle of all kinds of incredible things. Each decade of her life contained amazing things going on. And in her 20s, in the 1920s, it was a great struggle, incredible struggle. The Catholic worker was born out of crisis with the Great Depression, ecological collapse, and economic collapse. So let's keep the context of her life in mind, both social and economic and political. I believe that she had a very consistent vision, both pre and post conversion. You know, we do have the Catholic Church wanting to say she was a sinner and then she found Jesus and she was holy. And that just doesn't work in my spiritual journey. And Dorothy was very influenced and very radicalized by such an array, not just of American writers and thinkers, but Russian writers and thinkers. Just a very amazing background, very eclectic and very global. In her own time. She wove many strands of her life into the ultimate work of the Catholic worker. And we can see that, you know, she lived out a life as, you know, a partying young woman, a mother, a family life, and then a devout Catholic. And it's a fine example for all of us to learn from how she brought together the practical and the spiritual and the joy, the simplicity of life that she really did enjoy. I think that she's given us a lesson of, if we can achieve love in our lives, that might be even greater than achieving justice. And I've just recently been thinking, chewing on this idea of, you know, Jesus on the cross looks like quite a failure, nailed up there, dying, tortured to death. And as a child, I struggled with that image, completely struggled with that image. And, you know, Dorothy figured out the message, the basic essential message was one of love. The only solution is love. And that is the way of Christ. You know, I grew up with the words of self-sacrifice and dying to self. And those words upset me, you know, both as a child and especially as a teenager. And in my life now, I've grown into a better understanding of what that means, you know, being a mother and a grandmother myself. Let's not forget that Peter Maurin was really the yeast of this project. Dorothy always referred to him as the founder. And he introduced her to cult, culture, and cultivation. And the cult being the daily mass. And the daily mass is what is the glue that kept her together in terms of doing this very challenging work. And the culture is the beauty, you know, the arts, the music, the science, all of these things that make us human. And cultivation, of course, being our connection to the earth. I'm so grateful for Pope Francis's Laudato Si encyclical. And of course, Tamar was very connected to the earth. And she was a disciple of Peter Maurin in that sense. And for myself, I'm still on the same piece of land as I came to at age 2. We left here when I was 2 in 1957, and I'm still there, and we grow probably 75% of our food. So that cultivation is very critical. And of course, the Catholic social teachings. I'm very happy to have learned late in life. This is all a learning continuum for me about who Dorothy was. And I was very thrilled to see that the New Deal really was based on rerum novarum. And I know that Dorothy said it's not governments that are going to do this work, it's people for each other. And she was most recently described as a beautiful, lonely woman by a bishop out in Chicago. He did a homily completely centered on her. And you know, hearing from a variety of people, and 2 people here in the audience met Dorothy. And this is beautiful. These are wonderful stories that we're here to share with each other. She had many examples of people who were very devout that really did bring her to God and reminded her that God really was central to her. And I do believe, you know, we're in the canonization process. I do believe that she will be made a doctor of the church for the 20th century. And in her time, she was rather reviled by her beloved church, her mother church. You know, she said that we had to live daily with the dissatisfactions of the church. And I myself have had to struggle with my baptism and with the institution of the church. Regarding her following, you know, we're called as Christians. If we want to call ourselves Christians, we're called to follow Jesus. He said, love one another and follow me. And so this is what Dorothy is bringing to us. Let's not just focus on Dorothy, let's focus on Jesus. And God help us, you know, to give us the wisdom to discern his will, her will, and the strength to follow that. And I think that was what her life was about, pre and post conversion. She prayed, wrote, spoke, thought, and acted on this concept of God's love. And we do rely on each other, and we rely on community in order to do this work, and in order to live out this commandment of loving one another. Dorothy recognized that it was a natural human need to worship and to serve. And who are we going to serve? Are we going to serve Jeff Bezos? Or are we going to serve, you know, this machine that is literally dictating what's happening to the world right now? Or are we going to serve God and each other? And we become fully ourselves when we are engaged in working to love one another and working to be people of God. And of course, the common good is very much a personal responsibility. Peter talked about this all the time. Personal sacrifice, doing the works of mercy at a personal sacrifice. And the basic tenets that we really want to hold on to with Dorothy's story is, and this is what helps to subvert capitalism, voluntary poverty, you know, going without the material, manual labor, the works of mercy. This comes from Saint Benedict, and living with the least among us. And Pope Francis has addressed this, living in solidarity with the marginalized. These are the basic tenets, the foundation of the Catholic worker movement. We get up in the morning, we put the soup on. You know, Dorothy was very practical. This is what we do to keep ourselves focused, and this is what we do to remind ourselves of the bottom line, the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, to feed each other. Dorothy, I believe, was a mystic. I think she had the ability to see the sacred in everything. The piece that was just read about her writing to her readers. I mean, just imagine a person writing something like that, where her spirit was at. And it's something that, any of us who have been influenced by her struggle with in our daily lives. She was a mystic. And part of that is seeing the beauty in the daily ugliness. Living in the city is pretty ugly to me, having grown up in Vermont. But seeing things that are unseeable, really, in the way we conduct the world. And I want to thank the person who grievously shared her brother's death with us. I mean, that is just something that just tells us what's so wrong in the world, what's so wrong. And I will end with, I really want to quote, in September of 1945, Dorothy wrote about the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that was 10 years before I was born. And she talked about being a mystic and understanding the mystical body of Christ. She talked about breathing in the dust of our Japanese brothers and sisters here in New York after the deed, the crime that we committed. And it was a very lonely Catholic voice. So let's remember that about Dorothy. And let's also remember that when World War II was breaking out, and we're in the situation now with Ukraine, she had the strength and the courage and the guts to write in the paper, "We are still pacifists." And some Catholic workers burned the paper. And many of them said, "No, this is a good war. We need to join it." She held the line. She said, "You continue to circulate this paper or stop calling yourselves Catholic workers." So that's really sticking in my mind. Someone recently just reminded me of this history. And, here we are faced with war again, completely contrived, completely unjust. And one other piece of history that we need to keep in mind is what Dorothy did in Manhattan during the Cold War, the air raid drills. That first action occurred a month before I was born, June of 1955. So this is what she brings us. This is the story, and this is the work that she brings us. And last year at this time, I was at Danbury prison for protesting nuclear weapons. And I could not have taken that stand without this background, this history. Dorothy handed me the book by John Hershey, Hiroshima, when I was a teenager, young teenager. And this joy, this perseverance, this incredibly strong strength and faith, hope, and love is what we're called to remember as Catholics. Let's just remember that we have Dorothy, we have her with us. And as with the resurrection, we have Jesus with us every day. And this is what gives us the strength to carry on as we live in the Empire State of New York, in the heart of empire. Make no mistake, the purpose of the United States is to be the sole global hegemony. And that's what this war in Ukraine is about. Thank you.
Well, we certainly thank Martha for bringing Dorothy into the room today. Ruth started in that direction by reading directly from Dorothy Day, and Martha certainly enlarged, who Dorothy was on a number of levels, and we really appreciate. She was clearly a woman of our recent past who clearly speaks to our present, and we could have, no better messenger of what our directions really need to be today. So Martha, thank you very much for coming today and speaking to us. And Martha mentioned that Dorothy is in the canonization road, you know, which folks may or may not be aware of. And that's, you know, that's whatever anybody wants, however anybody wants to define that in terms of impact. But also the city of New York has recognized Dorothy Day, and our newest ferry boat is going to be named after Dorothy Day. So, you know, the Staten Island ferry is beloved by many, whether you are a commuter or you happen to be enjoy a ride every once in a while. But every day folks are going to see the name of Dorothy Day, and many times people will say, well, you know, who the heck was that? So it has its place. It has its place. And so we're proud of that. But again, thank you for being with us today. Our next item is a song, and our choir is going to lead us in song. It's number 168, One More Step. And Sarah, and I see Beatrice is joining us, and it looks like Sally is looking to join them as well. So we thank them for leading us in song today. Thank you, ladies. One More Step.
One more prayer, one more song. We'll sing one more song till every song is sung by everyone. We'll sing one more song.
We'll be extinguishing our chalice, and I invite you to join in the affirmation as we do so. Please repeat if you see the words in the order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. For these we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And for our closing words today, we have a piece by the Reverend Darcy Roque titled, "Each of Us Ministers to a Weary World." There is too much hardship in this world to not find joy every day. There is too much injustice in this world to not right the balance every day. There is too much pain in this world to not heal every day. Each of us ministers to a weary world. Let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make the world more loving, more compassionate, and more filled with the grace of divine presence every day. So ends our reading. And I'm going to presume that we do not have prelude music, or do we, Miss Sally? We do not have prelude music. So that being the case, so ends our service. We have hospitality in the parish hall.